co-director of the Center for Economic and Policy Research and president of Just Foreign Policy. He's written extensively on the Honduran crisis and is a longtime analyst of Latin American affairs. Mark, could you explain the significance of Zelaya's return, particularly coming on the eve of the United Nations General Assembly?
Yes, well, I think it will make a big difference. You know, there's been a big gap from the beginning since the coup on June 28th. There's been a big gap between the United States and the rest of the world on this situation. You know, the General Assembly of the United Nations, the Organization of the American States, the UNASUR, the Union of South American Nations, they all said right away that they wanted an immediate and unconditional return of the elected President Zelaya. And the United States has never really said that. In fact, the Arias Accords put all kinds of conditions on his return, including incorporating the people who led the coup into his government and moving the elections forward. And in fact, as Andres mentioned, you know, Brazil has been a strong supporter of Zelaya, and the foreign minister of Brazil said a couple of months ago, he complained to Hillary Clinton that these conditions were placed in the Arias agreement, that, you know, that this was not what the Organization of American States wanted, or the United Nations or anyone else. So he said this publicly. And so there's always been this big gap, but the administration has been able to paper it over because there hasn't been much attention on Honduras. And so now, with the General Assembly and and the attention focused by Zelaya's dramatic return, Obama is going to have to choose sides more than they have in the past. They've been this administration has been very ambivalent. They've gone back and forth, you know, between saying that, you know, he should be restored and then saying really almost the opposite. And on August 4th, they sent a letter, for example, to President Lugar, where they backed off quite a bit from supporting Zelaya. And, you know, Zelaya has been here 6 times since he was overthrown here in Washington, and President Obama has not met with him once, even though he's gotten requests from people who are very close friends and allies of his and Democratic members of Congress. And so these are the kind of signals, mixed signals, that this government has sent to the leaders of the coup, and that has strengthened their resolve all the way along. And they're very stubborn right now, for example. It's going to take a lot more pressure to get them out of there, a lot more, both international and domestic from within the United States. There's going to have to be a lot more pressure on the Obama administration to actually force them to leave.
And exactly what could the Obama administration do if it was committed to preserving the democratically elected leaders, Zelaya? What is the relationship the U.S. has with Honduras?
Oh, there's quite a bit more they could do. First of all, on August 11th, 16 members of Congress sent a letter to President Obama and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and asking them to freeze the assets of the coup leaders. And even the government, they can also freeze their assets. You know, when Aristide, President Aristide of Haiti was overthrown the first time, George Bush the first actually froze some of the assets of the dictatorship and gave it to the government in exile, to President Aristide. And this was, you know, a Republican president who actually, that government actually supported or was involved in the coup initially. And so this is a minimum they could do. They could, you know, they could put all kinds of pressure that they haven't put. And again, you see our Secretary of State, she's trying to say, well, both sides should do this, both sides. She even said last night that she supported the curfew that this government has put, you know, on people to prevent them from peacefully assembling. And so this is the kind of thing. And, you know, there has not been one word from this administration about the massive human rights violations committed by this dictatorship, the thousands of arbitrary arrests and detentions, the beatings. People have been shot and actually killed at demonstrations. These human rights abuses have been denounced by Human Rights Watch, by Amnesty International. by the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights of the Organization of American States, by Honduran human rights groups, by Europe, and nothing has come out of this administration. I think that really says a lot. That tells you how much this government has not wanted to undermine the dictatorship in Honduras. That's what's going to have to change, and I think there's going to be more international pressure and hopefully domestic pressure as well to change that.
Mark Weisbrot, to the surprise of the coup regime, Zelayas returned to Honduras. He's now in the Brazilian embassy in Tegucigalpa. But if he were in New York and wanted to speak, address the UN General Assembly, what would happen at the United Nations? Who would they recognize?
Well, they would recognize him, and he would get enormous support. And that was, I'm sure, his other plan. If he hadn't gone back to Honduras, he would have spoken there. But this, I think, is much more powerful. I mean, that would have gotten maybe, a few lines here and there in the news. This now forces it to the world attention. You're going to see a lot of support in the United Nations and from various heads of state for Zelaya, a lot more pressure. And here in Congress, too, by the way, and if your viewers want to do anything, they can contact their members of Congress, and there's another letter going to come from members of Congress stating that Zelaya should return. And also, the School of the Americas Watch has asked for people to write to and call the State Department. So, there's going to be more and more pressure on them. And the question is, will they really do what needs to be done to get rid of this government? Because the government there still has their friends here. You had Lanny Davis on the show. They have influential people. They have the Republicans, and they have, a lot of interest in this government, including the military wants to keep their base there, and they, there's all these forces here that don't really want Zelaya to go back. Or if they're willing to have him go back, they don't want him to go back as a victor. That's another thing that they're very worried about, that he comes off winning and their friends in the government, in the de facto regime, end up losing. So again, it's going to take a lot of pressure, but that pressure has definitely gone up quite a bit with Zelaya's return.
Mark Weisbrot, I want to go back to Andres in the Brazilian embassy in Tegucigalpa. Andres Conteris, who's with Democracy Now! In Espanol, Democracy Now! In Spanish. He is right near the president now, who's talking with reporters. Andres, describe what's happening.
And right here with the president, and he is speaking. I'm going to let you hear his voice and try to interpret a little bit. Y obliguemos a la dictadura que entre en este diálogo para solucionarlo por más de todo. We will obligate this dictatorship to enter into dialogue with us. Lo hicieron en mi casa cuando invadieron mi casa, provocando este estado de facto y represivo que tiene hoy el pueblo hondureño sometido y secuestrado. Just the way that they attacked my house and they brutally kidnapped me, this is the way that they are attacking us now, even today. The president is taking a drink of water now, and we're going to ask him a question. Presidente, un saludo, Presidente. It's not possible to get a question in right now, but we will just listen to his response to other questions. Estados Unidos, señor presidente, quieren saber qué es lo que usted pide para el pueblo y el gobierno de Estados Unidos.
Que hagan respetar la Carta Democrática de la OEA.
That the U.S. should respond and respect the OAS Charter.
Que se convoque de manera urgente al Consejo de Seguridad de Naciones Unidas.
The United States should call for an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council.
Y que se preparen para actuar con todas las actividades comerciales y económicas para hacer que esta dictadura entienda el mensaje.
The United States should take every type of trade sanction measure in order to pressure this regime now in power in Honduras. That's the questions I was able to ask, Mr. President.
Andres Conteris, thanks so much for being with us. We will continue to follow the story, bring you more on this tomorrow. Again, the latest news is that the president, the democratically elected president of Honduras, Manuel Zelaya, has returned to Honduras after 3 months. Not exactly clear how he made it over the border, but he said he walked, he traveled. Not clear who aided him in this, and then ended up within the Brazilian embassy. The coup regime leader, Roberto Micheletti, is demanding of Brazil to turn over Zelaya so that he can arrest him. Andres Conteris with Nonviolence International and Democracy Now! In Espanol is standing next to the president right now in the Brazilian embassy. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. We'll be back in a minute.